Welcome to A Deeper Dive. This podcast is an extension of our Sunday sermons, a place where we slow down, ask better questions, and talk through God's Word together. Each episode, we'll revisit ideas from Sunday and spend time on the parts we didn't get to fully unpack. Whether you're listening on your commute, at home, or in a quiet moment, our prayer is that this conversation helps you grow in understanding and faith. Thanks for being here. Let's take a deeper dive. Well, welcome back to A Deeper Dive. My name is Eli Boldman. I am the Director of Worship and College Ministries here at First Baptist Forsyth.
And my name's Jay Todd. I have the honor and privilege of serving here as the Senior Pastor. I'm excited about another edition of Deeper Dive.
Yes. Whenever you say that, I always feel a little bit more self-conscious about how I introduced myself.
Dude,
but
you're
that's
fine.
good. No, I mean, it's right.
I say it because I don't want Senior Pastor carries
That's true. It is an honor and privilege to be
If you
here
want
doing
to, I can
this.
change the way I say it.
No, I think it's good. All right. So, Jay, let's look back at yesterday on the sermon, kind of review what we went over and what we're going to step into today.
Yeah, so the sermon yesterday, packed with points. Can't believe I got it in, but we talked about the image of God and really drilled in on two keywords for each question. We had two questions. What is the image of God, and why is it important? And defining the image of God is notoriously difficult because the Bible doesn't give us a definition. So I used two words, reflection and relationship. And then we jumped into why is it important, which is where the Bible does give us the payoff. And we talked about two D words, which was dominion and dignity, so that we have inherent value as human beings, and kind of tease that out. Yeah.
That's good. So as we kind of step back, what is the central truth from Genesis 1, 24 through 31, which is what we went through yesterday? What's that central truth that we take from that section of Scripture that we've gone through?
Yeah, so I think the central emphasis of that section is the fact, as I kind of entitled the sermon, humans are the crown jewel of creation. We're the most important part of creation. And that really, if we go back to our podcast discussion, I think 2 weeks ago, is how God created humanity out of the overflow of his goodness.
Yes.
Is that really, by giving us stewardship over creation, it's a great gift, such a beautiful gift. But then kind of the main thrust of my sermon was more of the payoff of how we have inherent value as human beings. Both, and that's important for us both in our own identity and also gospel witness in our culture.
Okay, so, yeah. That's good. Okay, one question I wanted to actually bring up as we sit here thinking of, we're in Genesis, just starting. We've not actually talked about who we look to as the author of Genesis.
Yeah.
That we're going to kind of reference a little bit more today. So,
Yeah.
who do we look to as author of Genesis?
Yeah, that's great. Actually, don't tell anybody, but I was actually in the middle of my sermon yesterday thinking, we didn't do authorship issues.
Yeah.
So, yes, so Genesis is the first book of the first 5 books of the Bible, which Jews refer to as the Torah. And that word oftentimes translates as law. So you'll have like law. Jesus referred to the law and the prophets and the Psalms. Traditionally, Christians have referred to the first 5 books as the Pentateuch. It's a Greek phrase that means fivefold book. And so Genesis is the first of those 5, and all throughout Scripture, the authorship of those 5 books is attributed to Moses. In fact, in Mark's Gospel, which we just finished, Jesus refers to those first 5 books as the Book of Moses.
Okay.
So there's lots of terms for it, but Genesis is the first of a 5-part book that was written by Moses. So I actually referred to Moses a couple times in my sermon yesterday. So thanks for bringing that out.
Yeah, no, that's good. I was sitting here thinking, I don't think we've actually talked about that. Okay, well, to jump in, creation of land animals first. Why does Moses then categorize the land animals the way he does?
Yeah, so I didn't get to hit this in the sermon yesterday. I mentioned it, but it is interesting that when you look at the day 6, so just to kind of review, he's created on day 3 the space for the land animals and the humans, which is the dry ground. And if we go back to day 3, if you remember, he just basically moves the water into seas, and the dry ground appears. But you remember last week we talked that on day 3 we get 2 it was goods, which corresponds to day 6 you get 2 it was goods.
Yes.
And so the land animals he creates, he divides into 3 categories. Here in the ESV it says livestock, creeping things, and beasts of the earth.
Yes.
And kind of the categories, we like to think, again, we have a bad habit of coming scientifically. But for them, think of more like a shepherd
Right.
or a farmer. So you've got livestock, which would be your domesticated animals, right? And then you have your more wild animals. And then basically everything that stays low on the ground falls into creeping things.
Okay.
So like domesticated animals, you're dealing with like sheep and goat and cattle, right? And then wild beasts get into lions and tigers and bears, not sure they had tigers, but lions and bears are mentioned in the scripture.
Yep.
And then the creeping things could include a lot. Gordon Wyndham says it refers to like mice, reptiles, insects, and he says any other little creatures that creep on the ground.
Yep.
They keep close to the ground.
The picture's there. I can see that.
Yeah. So those are the 3 categories. But the cool thing is that they're called living creatures, which is also what we saw on day 5 with the sea animals.
Right.
So you get living creatures, and then in chapter 2, humanity is referred to as a living creature.
Okay.
So we share this basically animate what have you referred to it? Animate creation.
Yes.
We have that in common with the sea creatures and land animals. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Cool connection there as well.
Okay. So then, as far as the animals as animate beings, what are some of those main factors, like in contrast with the rest of creation then?
Yeah, so the other big contrast is with the plants.
Right.
And again, in our culture, from a scientific standpoint, we talk about plant life. But in the ancient culture, it was just a plant. They didn't move.
It was not life.
They didn't breathe. Yeah. If you chop down a tree, you don't see it, like you don't see the air leaving its lungs, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Or closing its eyes. So the animate is again kind of joking, like I did in my sermon yesterday. Like compare it to your dog. Your dog is a living, moving animal, a being,
right?
Which parallels us more so than it does the plants, unless we're on Middle Earth with J.R. Tolkien, and then the trees start moving.
Yep.
And walking.
You got your Ents. Well, that's good. So it's all kind of leading then towards humanity then
Yes, almost as we go through chapter 1, it's getting more complex, God's creation. And then when you get to man, you're in the image of God, which is the most complex.
That's good. And then Genesis 1:30. Talking about the breath, everything that has breath. What is that? What can you go back into that scripture? What's the actual verse?
Yeah. So this is where we get the idea of the breath of life that God. So in chapter 2, that's what God breathes into man, the breath of life. But in chapter 1, the beasts of the field, the birds of the heaven, and basically all the creeping things have the breath of life. And so in 1:30, we again get another parallel between humans and the animate, the land animals and sea creatures.
That's good.
That we see there. But in that 1:30, what it's talking about is how God gave both humans and the beasts of the earth and the fish of the sea, birds of heaven. He gave them plants for food. Yeah. So
in the account of actually him creating animals, land animals specifically, starts with like the earth. He called earth to bring forth, and then I think it's in the next verse, or possibly even later in that verse, he says, "And God made." So, is there, as far as original language that's in this, is there something within there to take from? Because when I'm reading it, like, okay, he calls the land to bring forth, and then the next is, "And God made." And obviously, God made everything. It's the same concept of he's made the clay and molded it.
That's right.
But he's calling it to bring forth in and of itself too. Go into that.
No, that's good. It is interesting because I think I mentioned this last time, maybe not. So if you go back to day 5, he says, "Let the waters swarm with the living creatures, and let the birds fly across the earth." And then it says, "And God created." And so he created those animals in day 5.
Right.
And then in humans, he says, "Let us make." Then he creates the words bara in both of those passages. But then with the land animals, he's saying, "Let the earth bring forth,"
Right.
which actually sounds a lot like the creation of the plant life on day 3, because in verse 12 of chapter 1, it says the earth brought forth the vegetation.
Right.
So that's the interesting part is he so we might say God is using the earth, like almost working through the earth to create the land animals. On that, it's hard to know.
Yeah.
There's a distinction there. It is interesting he doesn't use the word bara
Right.
to create on that first part of day 6. He uses that with humans and with the sea creatures. Now, it could be implied since it's sandwiched between the two, or it could be emphasizing by using the earth, by bringing them forth from the earth. It's almost like the plants. He's using the earth as his, like almost an intermediary.
I say like the medium.
Yeah, the medium. Yeah.
Okay.
So
That's good.
because again, we know when we get to chapter 2 that he creates humans from the dust of the earth.
Right.
But I still think that's a little different than bringing them forth from the earth in chapter 1.
Yeah. And it's very different languages using there. Okay. Well, you kind of alluded to it. I'm going to jump into Genesis 1:26. In 1:26, when he says, "Let us make man," who is us?
Yeah, classic question. Because so in 1:26 he says, "Let us make man in our image and after our likeness." So everything's plural there. Then when you get to verse 1:27, it says God created man in his own image, and then it goes through in the image of God. So in other words, it goes plural in 1:26,
Right.
and then 1:27 it goes singular. So it's really, really tough. So I would say there's a few options that scholars have given, and the most popular ones, I'll start with kind of, one is a plural of majesty. It's like God's just so majestic. He says, "Let us." That one's not, I would say, not very strong or common.
Right.
The other one's this idea of self-deliberation or self-exhortation. It'd be like if I said, I want to do something, so let us go do it. Again, it's maybe. I think that the two that are the most common, or one is this idea that he's, by saying us, he's actually including the angels in that.
Okay.
I'll tell you the strengths and weaknesses of that. The strengths are that of all the creatures that God created, whenever angels appear in the Bible, they oftentimes appear as humans.
Right.
So if he's talking about the angels, you first have to agree that the angels also are in God's image. So the angels were created before humans, and the angels are in God's image. Then by saying "let us make,"
Right.
he's basically saying "let's make." The critique of that one is it doesn't seem that the angels actually were making. Like he's not saying he's not saying "let me make man in our image." He's saying "let us make." So that's a critique of that, of that view. And then the other popular one is the notion that he's referring here like a divine plurality, like in the sense of a trinity, like he's speaking Trinitarian here.
Right.
I would say the weakness of that one is kind of, I think we talked about this when we talked about Elohim, is if we're thinking about what Moses intended, I just don't think Moses was giving us a full-blown understanding of the Trinity. Yeah. So that's what we call progressive revelation. Like as Scripture goes on, we learn more about God.
Right.
And we learn that he's a triune God. So I don't think we have a full-blown understanding of Trinity. I think this is consistent with what God eventually reveals about himself with the Trinity. But the other wrinkle that scholars will put on it is he does in chapter 1, verse 2, mention his Spirit. Yeah. So it could be that he's talking here, the let us is kind of the idea of God the Father and speaking to the Spirit in the process of creation.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it's really tough because in the New Testament, Jesus is the agent of creation.
Right.
Colossians 1, we looked at that. So a little bit of it, if we zoom out and think, not just this passage, but maybe whole Bible, absolutely the Trinity was all involved in creation. Right. I just don't think that's what Moses is revealing to his first readers here.
Right.
So that's where I'm hesitant to say it's full-blown Trinity here. I think it's consistent with it. So then if we don't take that, of the other views, I just don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just, all of them have weaknesses.
Yeah. I think we're not supposed to understand
mystery.
it all.
Yeah, it's a mystery. Yeah. Well, what I will say this is kind of getting a preview of this week coming up this Sunday. But what scholars do point out is you've got let us make in 126. Then in 127, it goes back to the singular God created him in his image. Okay. But then you've got let us make man.
Right.
And then in 127, you got male and female.
Right. So
you've got like a singularity and a plurality with God, and you have the same thing reflected in humanity.
Oh, yeah.
So there's some scholars have pointed that out.
Yeah. So, which view then best fits this immediate context?
I really, to be honest with you, I really have to plead the fifth. I would, again, I don't find a view that gives us satisfactory answers. I mean, I would say your closest might be the Spirit of God and
right, just based off previous his already involvement.
That's
what we'll see later on in Scripture.
Yeah,
so I think that's fine. I think again, there's going to be questions that we have for him. So
that's right.
Good.
Yep. It's one of those puzzlers that we can't answer.
Yeah. So the emphasis though is God alone creates. It's still preserving one God.
Correct.
Now, one God, three persons, yes, but this is still it's preserving the monotheistic. And that's good. Yeah. Okay. So let us make man in our image. What does it mean then to be made in the image of God?
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I mean, like I said yesterday, it's really tough. But I think there's just several lenses to look through. I think reflection, like I said, just a reflection and relationship are huge. And when it comes to the reflection, I do love the ancient Near Eastern parallels where you have kings setting up images of themselves in conquered lands. So in other words, especially if we pull out the dominion aspect as humanity, that we are images of God. As we exercise dominion over creation, we represent him. But then also on the reflection side, the relationship side.
Yep.
I do really think that's an important one as well, because, for instance, we are personal beings and God is a personal being. I didn't get into this, but James Sire talks about what does it mean to be a person. What does personhood mean? And he says it means we have self-consciousness. In other words, we can think about ourselves thinking. And we have self-determination. In other words, we have a will. And so God has both of those, and we have both of those. Right. And so that parallels, and that's what allows us to communicate with him and have a relationship. So those are two good guesses. In fact, over the next couple of weeks, though, I'll actually pull in some of the other common guesses at the image of God, like morality, and we're social beings and stuff. But I think it's best to say all those are the outworking of the image of God,
right,
and not necessarily the image of God itself. Because I think we have to be careful with the image of God, because I would argue that, for instance, a mentally handicapped person, or somebody who's even in a coma is still in the image of God. We still want to. So if we just tie it to one or two things, and we run the risk of saying, "Oh, they can't do this,"
don't display that, then they're not. Yeah, that's really good.
So we would say the Bible doesn't define the image, but every human being, regardless of mental state or even consciousness, is still in the image of God.
Yeah.
So, and then all those other things that we're talking about are the ways it fleshes itself out in our lives.
Yeah. That's good. Why do you think Genesis doesn't actually define the image? And I think we kind of touched on that just a little bit just now, but why doesn't Genesis define the image explicitly?
Yeah. Great question. Well, I'll tell you one. I think one reason is because Genesis 1 is telling us a story. Mm-hmm. So it's not writing a treatise. Right. It's not writing a essay on the image of God. So we would love it if Moses just stopped and said, okay, let me give you,
yes,
let me write a research paper for you on the image of God.
Yeah.
So I think part of it's just the narrative style. And then the other part is I actually think that it because it shows the outworking of it, that's all we need.
Yeah.
So now another interesting thing is Richard Lentz points out that once you get further out of Genesis, the word that's used for image, the Hebrew word tselem, is oftentimes used for really the rest of the Hebrew Bible to refer to idols.
Oh.
So he draws a parallel between God creating man in his image and how humans then create images of God that are idolatrous.
Right.
So
yeah. That's good. I think when I've read this in the past, when I think image of God, I've not tied it to image as you look at something and it reflects aspects of its creator. And I think it's not like he's not saying he's made us to specifically physically look like God. It is your image in that and it's that, again, the reflection piece and the relationship piece. It's humanity, we are reflecting different aspects of him. Now we're doing it in a broken fashion.
Yeah.
We'll get into that later too.
It's important.
But that's good. It's helped me kind of see, that's actually how image is defined here. It's not a physical appearance.
Yeah.
It is more a reflection of the created or the creator. So it's good. I like that. So we talked a little bit about the ancient Near Eastern culture. How does Genesis differ from the other ancient creation stories? Because we talked about them kind of during the sermons. I think the last 2 weeks and a little bit in the last podcast too, and more of their cultural stories and how we talked about the polemic. But how then Genesis, the creation account specifically, how does that differ from the other creation stories?
You're talking about like the creation of humanity.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So what's interesting is in the creation of humanity, other creation stories, remember in their stories in the ancient Near East, they're very polytheistic. So creation comes as a result of the war between various gods and this struggle. And the human creation is almost like an afterthought. And in fact, humans were created almost as slaves to serve the gods.
Right.
But what's funny is so we've got probably a month before we get to the flood story. But there's a flood story in the Babylonian tradition called the Epic of Gilgamesh, which a lot of people have heard of. When that story, the gods flood the earth because the humans were being too noisy, and they woke them up from that. They couldn't sleep.
Yep. Yeah.
So even though we haven't got to the flood story, it does give us a different understanding of how humans were viewed from the ancient Near Eastern Israel's culture versus the biblical story. Because the biblical story, humans, again, I would argue we are created as servants of God.
Right.
I think I drove that home our first sermon on Genesis of how he's king and we're his subjects.
Yes.
But we are given dignity that you don't see in the ancient or Eastern stories, because we're not, and also there's this sense in which waking the gods up from their nap creates a flood, shows how fickle their gods were,
right?
But it also shows how kind of like non-moral, like the flood story was. Like in the Bible, God destroys the earth because of their wickedness and rebellion,
right?
Which I'd argue is only possible because we're made in the image of God.
Right.
So it's really cool. It's really cool to just think about all the contrast.
Yeah.
But so the humans are not quite as dignified in the ancient Eastern creation stories or life.
So let's go into dignity then, because it is a very different idea that they had. So like Babylonian, Egyptian, it wasn't that, well, Egyptians actually had a little bit more of a, they did with some of their beliefs were that the human had some divine essence in them, but the Babylonians, that's more of a, they were an annoyance. And so, all right, here's a flood, destroyed, being too noisy. There's no inherent value because they were made in the God's image. Now, I say that carefully, meaning we are made in God's image.
Capital G.
Yes, exactly. Where do we see then, we touched on it yesterday, but let's go into the human dignity in our culture. How do we see it being denied now?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I had a whole laundry list yesterday.
Yeah.
In the sermon, and we could have added more on that. We just there's just so many ways that we don't even realize we're doing it, where we use others as tools or instruments, which anytime we're using other people instead of honoring other people, I think you're missing the fact that humans aren't tools or instruments, but they are valuable beings created in the image of God. And so there's this honoring that should take place. I listed lots of obvious things yesterday and other stuff, but I think the end goal is to think, where are we treating other humans as dispensable or less than human, or depersonalizing them as well. I quoted Eugene Peterson. He doesn't like the words resource because he argues that calling a human a resource is treating them like a thing and not a. He talks about, in that section I was reading, he talks about how we talk about today self versus soul. And he argues how soul is such a richer term that gets to the heart of humanity that we're and that stuff. But yeah, he talks about resource. He talks about how we use the word consumer and how not so much use of that word, but treated that way. Yeah. So, yeah.
Ironically, like in my just reflection on this, thinking of, well, how do we devalue humans? Like, it's ironic. I mean, in my experience, like medical workers, you would think that would be some who they truly value humans, right? But it almost puts you in a position where it becomes so easy to devalue because you're not looking at a soul, you're looking at a problem.
Oh, yeah.
Something that needs to be fixed. And part of that, you have to look at some of the things that need to be fixed. But so often, especially when I work ER, you go in somewhere, treat a patient, and again, there's another label there. It's not you're treating a person, you're treating a patient, someone who comes here with a problem. But you'd walk out and think, one, I don't remember their name. It's just a quick interaction. Tell me what's going on. I'm going to walk out and see what I can do to help this. But it was so, looking back, it really devalues them as people. And you didn't, it's just, I don't know, I think that's a part of it, has to be there in some piece of it because you are treating people.
Yeah.
And you have to look at it from a broad picture, but I think it's such an easy world to devalue someone and just condense them into, you have a heart problem, you have a respiratory problem, but versus this is still a human soul created in the image of God. But yeah, just my own thoughts on it is, it's everywhere. And including the places that you would, again, I would think the hospital, it's full of people who want to help other people, but not necessarily. It's just, it can still put you in a position. You have to consciously take the time to think, this is someone made in the image of God. And that's good. It was a good reminder and also just reflection back on how things have been. So.
Yeah. It's funny. I've always thought I've had doctors who I've gone and see tell me they have a quota of patients they have to see every day.
Yeah.
And you could feel that you're I'm just being herded in and herded out.
Yeah.
HERD.
Yes. Yes.
like a herd of cattle.
Yep.
So, but I mean, yeah. So I don't know if that would relate to what you're saying or
No,
not.
absolutely. It's just their numbers.
They're just numbers. Yep. And dollar signs.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what, it's funny. I used the illustration yesterday of fantasy sports and sports gambling, where you monetize these athletes, and it's crazy. It's just really is. They become just a tool to get you money or
absolutely.
something that's crazy.
Looking at the Olympics right now as everything's going on, it's the whole deal is how can we make more money off of this? And that's that is rampant.
Yeah.
How then, just a reminder, how do we just stop ourselves daily then?
Yeah.
And break that pattern, because it does. You just fall into a pattern, like in the hospital. Like I'd walk in, walk out, and you would shock yourself into, okay, I need to talk to one of these people. Remember a name when I go back in. What's an easy way just to break that pattern?
It's funny. Because yesterday, the doers of the word, one of the doers of the word I gave was pray for a person or a group of people who you're tempted to devalue. And I've been actually processing that myself. Like who do I devalue? And then the question is why? And I think if we will honestly ask and answer that question, because answer the why behind it, it gets us a little bit to the heart. I know for me, my temptation, it kind of relates to what you're saying on the medical field. Like when you're crushed with patients and you've got so many, it's just hard to take the time to look them in the eye, or to, maybe they're not conscious, but to just ponder the significance of who they are as well. And so for me, if you're a task-driven person, it's so easy to just think my task completion is more important than people. And so I just think slowing down and letting people know just how much they mean to you. And I mean, you can't do that to everybody, but when God brings people into your life and gives you just a conversation, hopefully they walk away thinking, okay, they really do care for me. I think it gets at the heart of it. Again, it's hard, but it's true.
I think you said too, just even taking that time to just a quick prayer, center back in, I guess that it is. I mean, if you're praying for someone, you're going to think a little bit deeper about who they are. And you may not know a lot, but even just that as a reminder, they're worth praying for, right? That it's, everyone is, that you're worth, if you're made in the image of God, then absolutely.
And I would add, just to reiterate what I said yesterday, I think it also is important that we take great care in how we speak about other people, because our words really do shape us. And so if I get used to speaking derogatorily about another person or another group, it's going to affect the way I view that person or that group.
Right.
And that's where prayer comes in. Praying for somebody you struggle with is the best way to overcome any maybe discriminatory thoughts you have, any bitterness, any hatred, any feelings of superiority, because when you're praying for somebody, it's really hard to pray for God to bless them at the same time, hate them or be bitter. So I think that's it.
Okay, that's good. So then to pull it back over to verse 28. So we have his blessing and then the mandate. Why is God's blessing in verse 28 so significant? And also, can we specify what that blessing is? Because when I was reading, it's just, and God blessed them. And then it keeps going. So is he referencing something else that he's already said, or is he referencing something he's about to say? Do we know what the blessing is?
Good. So blessing is going to become it's one of the major themes of Genesis. So in day 6 and in day 5 with the sea creatures and the birds, we get God blessing them and giving them, to tell them to be fruitful and multiply.
Right.
And so blessing, Wednesday nights, I've been doing a story of the Bible. Like, we've been looking at the big picture of the story, and we finish it this Wednesday night. But one of the things, it's the category I've been using to organize the whole biblical story is blessing. And I say that God's blessing is that God is with you, so his presence, and God is for you, his favor. And what we see in Genesis in particular is is this idea of God's blessing is seen a lot in kind of reproductive success, which is really interesting because a lot of the wives in Genesis are barren. So it's like there's a play there because it's like an obstacle to God's blessing. And so he's always having to. So in the creation account, the blessing in both cases is tied to, except for day 7, we're going to see a blessing. But so far, the blessing is tied to the command to be fruitful and multiply.
Okay.
So I think what it's showing is that God is both with humans, which we'll see in chapter 2, very explicit, and 3. But then God is also, his favor is on them to fulfill the mandate he just gave them.
Right.
So he's saying, I'm blessing you, so therefore be fruitful and multiply. Like, my favor is on you to carry out this creation mandate that I'm giving you in verse 28.
So he's equipping them via the blessing to then better fulfill the commandment.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
The blessing's going to be huge, so just keep hanging on there because we're going to get, in chapter 3, we start getting some cursing, which is the opposite. And it's going to play all the way through Genesis. So so blessing is a really important theme to hang on to as we go through Genesis.
Okay. So he blessed them then to multiply and go forth, and then calls them to have dominion over the earth. What does dominion actually mean in this?
Yeah, so the word, it's kind of uses 2 words. He says subdue it.
Right.
So that word, the picture would be, I like to picture kind of if you have your backyard and you just don't cut your grass and you don't trim your hedges, it just kind of gets a little chaotic, right? It feels overgrown. And so we get a better picture of this as we look at chapter 2 when they're in the garden. Because they're put in the garden, right? And they're told to basically work it and to keep it.
Right.
So we're going to get to that in a few weeks. But the imagery here is that man is supposed to, humans, Adam and Eve, are supposed to take what God told them to do in the garden and really extend that all through creation. So God's original plan for humans is to take Eden to the ends of the earth. So as they multiply, their offspring would then work and till and keep the ground and keep extending out and kind of subdue it, the creation in that sense, so that it's not taking over, so to speak.
Right.
But then the dominion part is tied to it. That's where you get more into it talks about fish of the sea, birds of the heaven, like animals. And then as one phrase, it says, and all the earth.
Right.
So that's where dominion is we're getting, where we reflect how God rules over the earth. So God rules as we sang yesterday, a good and gracious king.
Yes.
And so therefore we're supposed to reflect him and how we extend that rule over the earth. So that's why a lot of scholars call this the cultural mandate. It's called the creation mandate or the cultural mandate because as humans, we're always making things. We're always creating culture. And so just like God, kind of in the 6 days of creation, is taking what he had made, created on Genesis 1:1, and he's kind of shaping it and making it into the earth that we now enjoy. So we're to extend that as we, as humans, use our gifts and our abilities to further create and bring order in the world as God's representatives to do that. So yeah, that's kind of the 2 of the big ones, this idea of rule, extending God's rule, and also kind of bringing order to creation. And then really the last one, I mentioned this yesterday, this is also where we're like called to use our creativity.
Right.
So again, in chapter 2, it gives us even more kind of clarity on this, but a verse that a lot of artists really love is when God tells Adam to name the animals. Because it's like God gave Adam the ability to name them whatever he wanted. It's like the creativity verse. Yeah. But it's true that God has given us this dominion where we extend his rule through taking the resources he's given us and being creative with them and representing his glory in that. So, and reflecting him.
That's good. Well, as the dominion piece, all those different aspects is just further reflections of God's image, which we keep tying it back to how, and this is kind of jumping ahead, but how is that image affected by the fall?
No, this is where I kind of ended the sermon yesterday, and I think it's an important point to clarify Because when we think about valuing people who are God's image bearers, oftentimes the people we struggle to value, we're like, they don't seem to be reflecting God's image. And that's because in the fall, I used it yesterday, it's like the image of God is distorted in each of us.
Right.
And so ironically, the image of God that allows us to have that self-determination, that free will, that then rebels against God, is also what makes it hard to love other image bearers. And so, I love thinking through this, but there's this, I quoted yesterday, I forget the guy's name, but he basically said the more sinful we become, the more beast-like we become. And it's true. If you just see people who are entrapped in sin, and they're just like, they just seem cold-hearted and like there's no conscience, and you're like, how does somebody get there? And I think that's true. Like we just drift further, and so that means that a person who's caught in that deep of sin is reflecting God less than, say, somebody who's been redeemed by Jesus and who's being conformed to His image and is looking more and more like Christ every day. So it doesn't take it away. So even the vilest of criminals is still an image bearer. Right. But it does distort it in the sense of the more depraved, the more sinful we become, the less we are reflecting the image of our one true God, who is holy and just.
The more broken that reflection is. That's good. And then again, that can only be then restored by Spirit, which is not perfected until we're home with Him.
Yeah. And that's the hope, and that's the important part. Like, that's the beautiful thing. God is in the process. We're all in process as far as those of us who are following Christ for that image to be restored. And I think our progress is a sign of our progress is how well we love others, including our enemies. Because the more we love our enemies, the more like Christ we're looking. It's kind of like Jesus said, right? Even the Gentiles, even the nations, basically love their friends. It takes a special love to love your enemies.
Indeed, it does.
So,
that's good. Oh, I love all that. Well, let's preview next week. It's going to be heavy hitting topic, gender and the image of God. How do we go into that?
So when I was looking at Genesis and I was like, man, we're doing the image of God. Our culture there's so much in our culture that is just directly attacking what the image of God looks like. And especially younger people today, there's just a lot of confusion when it comes to gender and sexuality. And so I was like, I just need to take a week and just hit it. And so this week I'm going to talk about kind of God's design for gender, and then talk about how our culture has twisted that. And then I'm going to end my message by talking about how we as believers should respond to people who struggle with same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria. But I'm going to divide how we respond to unbelievers who struggle with it, and how we respond to believers who struggle with it, because it's two different responses. So that's what we're going to kind of hit. And so prayers are appreciated, because I know that we have numerous families in our congregation, numerous individuals in our congregation who probably are struggling with it. It's just so universal now. So I want to give resources, advice, but in a very pastoral way that helps people and do that. So pray for me. It's a big message.
All right. Well, we'll jump in next week then.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Well, thank you so much for listening to A Deeper Dive. We hope that our conversations have been edifying as you continue to think about the passage that we looked at this past Sunday. Our prayer is that our discussions will help you not only gain a better understanding of God's Word, but that you will also fall deeper in love with Christ, and that your life will reflect Him more and more each day as we both have these conversations and look at God's Word together on Sunday morning. We hope you will join us next time as together we take a deeper dive.